Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Social phenomena in discourse analysis. In discourse analysis, language is understood as a social practice deeply intertwined with social phenomena. Rather than viewing language as a neutral medium, discourse analysts study how language shapes, reflects, and constructs social realities. Social phenomena in discourse analysis refer to the ways in which language practices are linked to broader societal issues such as identity, power relations, inequality, ideology, and cultural norms. Analyzing these connections helps reveal how language functions as both a product and a producer of social life. 1. Discourse and identity construction. One of the key social phenomena explored in discourse analysis is identity construction. Through discourse, individuals and groups construct, negotiate, and perform their identities. This process is dynamic and context-dependent, as identity is continuously shaped by the social interactions and discourses in which individuals participate. Individual identity in discourse. Individual identity is formed and expressed through the language choices people make. Discourse analysis examines how speakers use language to position themselves within specific social roles or categories, such as gender, class, race, profession, or ethnicity. This process, known as positioning, involves the way individuals represent themselves and others in relation to the social norms and expectations present in the discourse. Example: a young professional during a job interview might adopt formal, professional language to construct an identity that aligns with the company's values and work culture. The analysis of this discourse would explore how the speaker's word choices, tone, and structure create a self-presentation that reflects professionalism and competence, collective identity and group membership. Discourse also plays a crucial role in the formation of collective identities. Through shared language practices, groups create and reinforce a sense of belonging and solidarity. This can be seen in political, cultural, or social movements, where members adopt common discourses that reflect their values, beliefs, and goals. Discourse analysts examine how these collective identities are shaped by the language used to establish group boundaries and distinguish insiders from outsiders. Example: in the discourse of environmental activism, the use of terms like sustainability warriors or climate defenders helps construct a collective identity centered around environmental protection. The analysis would look at how such language unites individuals under a shared cause and reinforces their group identity. Point 2. Power relations in discourse. Discourse is intricately linked to power and the ways in which power is distributed, maintained, and challenged in society. Language is a tool through which social hierarchies and authority are established and negotiated. Discourse analysis examines how power operates within interactions, institutions, and larger social structures, focusing on the ways language reflects and reinforces unequal power relations. Power dynamics in institutional discourse. Institutions such as the legal system, healthcare, and education rely on specific forms of discourse to maintain authority and control. The language used in these settings often reflects and legitimizes the power structures within the institution, with some participants, e.g., judges, doctors, teachers, positioned as authorities while others, e.g., defendants, patients, students, are placed in subordinate roles. Example: in legal discourse, the formal, highly specialized language of lawyers and judges reinforces their authority within the courtroom. A discourse analysis of trial transcripts might explore how the use of legal jargon and procedural language marginalizes defendants, who may lack the knowledge or linguistic resources to fully participate in the process. Resistance and subversion of power. While discourse can reinforce power, it can also be used to resist and subvert it. Social movements, marginalized groups, and activists often engage in discourses that challenge dominant ideologies and question existing power structures. Discourse analysts examine these forms of resistance to understand how alternative discourses emerge and how they contest dominant narratives. Example: Feminist discourse often challenges traditional gender roles and patriarchal norms by reinterpreting concepts such as equality and empowerment. Discourse analysis in this context would explore how feminist language subverts hegemonic gender discourses and seeks to redefine social norms around gender relations. Point 3. Ideology and hegemony in discourse. Discourse is a vehicle for ideology, which refers to the set of beliefs, values, and ideas that shape how people view the world. Ideologies are embedded in language, often unconsciously, and become normalized through discourse. Discourse analysis seeks to uncover these ideological underpinnings, revealing how they influence societal structures, beliefs, and behaviors. Naturalization of ideology in everyday discourse. One of the ways ideology operates in discourse is through naturalization, where certain ideas or beliefs are presented as common sense or self-evident. This makes ideology difficult to recognize because it appears neutral or unchallenged. Discourse analysts aim to reveal these ideological assumptions by critically analyzing how language is used to reinforce particular worldviews. Example: in advertising discourse, phrases like, "success means hard work," reflect capitalist ideologies that equate individual effort with economic achievement. By framing success in these terms, the discourse naturalizes a meritocratic worldview that downplays structural inequalities and social barriers. Hegemony and discursive practices. Hegemony refers to the dominance of one group's ideology over others, achieved through consent rather than force. In discourse analysis, hegemony is studied to understand how dominant ideologies are maintained through language and how alternative viewpoints are marginalized or suppressed. Hegemonic discourses are powerful because they shape public consciousness and limit the space for alternative discourses. Example: in political discourse, neoliberal ideology often dominates discussions around the economy, with terms like free market and competition framed as natural and inevitable. Discourse analysts would examine how this framing marginalizes alternative economic models, such as socialism or cooperative economics, and sustains the hegemony of neoliberal thought. Point 4. Social inequality in discourse. Discourse plays a significant role in producing and reproducing social inequalities, including those related to class, race, gender, and sexuality. Discourse analysis uncovers how language reflects these inequalities and how it contributes to their maintenance or challenge. By examining how marginalized groups are represented in discourse, analysts can reveal the mechanisms through which social inequality is perpetuated. Discourse and class inequality. Language often reflects class distinctions, with certain forms of discourse associated with higher social status and others with lower status. The way people speak, the words they use, and even the dialects they adopt can signal their social class. Discourse analysts explore how these linguistic markers contribute to the reproduction of class hierarchies and how language functions as a barrier or facilitator of social mobility. Example: in educational settings, students from working-class backgrounds may be disadvantaged by the dominant discourse, which favors formal, academic language. Discourse analysis would examine how this mismatch in language use affects student performance and reinforces class-based inequalities in education. Race and representation in discourse. Racial inequality is often reflected and reinforced through discourse, particularly in how different racial groups are represented in the media, politics, and everyday conversation. Discourse analysis examines how language constructs racial identities and how it either challenges or perpetuates racial stereotypes and prejudices. Example: in news coverage of crime, racialized language often portrays certain groups as inherently criminal or dangerous. A discourse analyst would investigate how these representations contribute to racial profiling and the perpetuation of negative stereotypes, revealing the link between language and racial inequality. Point 5. Cultural norms and values in discourse. Discourse reflects and reinforces cultural norms and values, shaping how people think, behave, and interact within a society. These norms are embedded in the language people use to talk about everyday life, relationships, work, and leisure. Discourse analysts study how these cultural norms are constructed through language and how they influence social practices. Gender norms in discourse. Gender norms are often communicated and reinforced through everyday language, shaping people's understanding of what is considered appropriate behavior for men and women. Discourse analysis looks at how language both reflects and enforces these norms and how it can also be used to challenge traditional gender roles. Example: in workplace discourse, phrases like, "man up," or "don't be such a girl," reinforce traditional gender norms that associate masculinity with strength and emotional restraint. A discourse analysis would examine how these phrases contribute to the marginalization of non-conforming gender identities and the perpetuation of gender stereotypes. Cultural values in national discourse. National discourse often reflects a country's cultural values, such as individualism, collectivism, or freedom. These values are communicated through political speeches, media discourse, and everyday conversations, shaping citizens' perceptions of national identity and their role within society. Example: in American political discourse, the value of individual freedom is frequently emphasized, with phrases like freedom of choice and personal responsibility. A discourse analysis would explore how this focus on individualism influences public policy, such as healthcare or welfare programs, and reinforces cultural values of self-reliance. 6. Globalization and transnational discourse. In the era of globalization, discourse has transcended national borders, leading to the emergence of transnational discourses that circulate across cultures and societies. Discourse analysis of global phenomena focuses on how language travels, transforms, and interacts with local discourses, producing new forms of meaning and social relations. Global media and cultural hegemony. The global media plays a significant role in shaping transnational discourse, often spreading dominant cultural narratives that reflect Western ideologies and values. Discourse analysts examine how these global narratives interact with local cultures and how they contribute to the spread of cultural hegemony. Example: in global advertising, Western ideals of beauty, success, and consumerism are often promoted through media campaigns. Discourse analysis would explore how these ideals are adapted to local contexts and how they influence cultural values and consumer behavior in non-Western societies. Social movements and global discourse. Global social movements, such as environmental activism or human rights advocacy, rely on transnational discourses to spread their message and mobilize support. Discourse analysts study how these movements construct their narratives and how they connect local struggles to global issues. Example: the discourse of the global climate movement often frames environmental issues as urgent global crises, with terms like climate emergency and planetary boundaries. Discourse analysis would examine how these terms shape global conversations about climate policy and inspire local activism. 7. Examples of social phenomena in discourse analysis. Example 1. Feminist discourse and gender identity. Feminist discourse often challenges traditional notions of gender by using language that reflects equality, empowerment, and resistance to patriarchal norms. A discourse analyst might explore how feminist blogs or social media platforms construct alternative gender identities and critique dominant gender ideologies. Example 2. Immigration discourse in media. Media discourse around immigration often reflects power dynamics and ideological struggles. A discourse analysis might examine how terms like illegal immigrant or migrant crisis frame immigration as a problem, reinforcing nationalist ideologies and exclusionary policies. Example 3. Corporate social responsibility discourse. The discourse of corporate social responsibility, CSR, reflects how companies frame their role in society. A discourse analyst could examine how corporations use language to construct identities as ethical, responsible actors, and how this discourse interacts with broader societal concerns about sustainability and ethical consumption. Conclusion. The study of social phenomena in discourse analysis provides insight into how language interacts with societal structures, identities, power dynamics, and ideologies. Through discourse, individuals and groups construct meaning, negotiate identities, and engage in the reproduction or challenge of social inequalities. By examining how discourse shapes and is shaped by social phenomena, analysts can uncover the complex ways in which language functions as both a reflection of and a tool for social action. Whether analyzing media representations, political speeches, or everyday conversations, discourse analysis reveals the profound role that language plays in constructing and maintaining social realities. Frequently asked questions. What are social phenomena in discourse analysis? Social phenomena in discourse analysis refer to the ways in which language practices are linked to broader societal issues like identity, power relations, inequality, ideology, and cultural norms. Discourse analysts study how language shapes, reflects, and constructs social realities, revealing how it functions as both a product and a producer of social life. How does discourse contribute to identity construction? Discourse plays a key role in constructing, negotiating, and performing identities. Individuals use language to position themselves within social roles and categories, such as gender, class, race, and profession. For example, in a job interview, a candidate might use formal language to present a professional identity. Discourse also shapes collective identities by uniting groups through shared language practices, as seen in social movements or cultural communities. How does discourse reflect power relations? Discourse reflects and reinforces power dynamics by establishing authority and control within interactions, institutions, and larger social structures. In institutional settings like the legal or healthcare systems, language often positions certain participants, e.g., judges, doctors, as authorities, while others, e.g., defendants, patients, are placed in subordinate roles. Discourse analysis examines how language practices maintain or challenge these power hierarchies. Can discourse be used to resist power? Yes, discourse can be used to resist and subvert power. Marginalized groups and activists often engage in discourses that challenge dominant ideologies and power structures. For example, feminist discourse challenges patriarchal norms by reinterpreting concepts like equality and empowerment, seeking to redefine social norms around gender relations. Discourse analysis explores how these alternative discourses contest dominant narratives. How is ideology embedded in discourse? Ideology is embedded in discourse through language that reflects and reinforces certain beliefs, values, and worldviews. These ideological assumptions often become naturalized, appearing as common sense. For instance, advertising discourse may frame success as a result of hard work, reflecting capitalist ideologies. Discourse analysis seeks to uncover these hidden ideologies and examine how they shape societal structures and behaviors. What is the relationship between hegemony and discourse? Hegemony refers to the dominance of a particular ideology over others, achieved through consent rather than force. In discourse analysis, hegemony is studied to understand how dominant ideologies are maintained through language. Hegemonic discourses shape public consciousness, making alternative viewpoints seem less legitimate. For example, neoliberal ideology often dominates economic discourse, marginalizing alternative economic models. How does discourse contribute to social inequality? Discourse contributes to social inequality by reflecting and reinforcing power dynamics related to class, race, gender, and sexuality. Language can perpetuate stereotypes, marginalize certain groups, and maintain social hierarchies. For example, educational discourse that favors formal, academic language can disadvantage students from working-class backgrounds. Discourse analysis uncovers how such language practices perpetuate social inequalities. How does discourse reflect cultural norms and values? Discourse reflects and reinforces cultural norms and values by shaping how people think, behave, and interact. Gender norms, for example, are communicated through everyday language, reinforcing ideas about appropriate behavior for men and women. In national discourse, cultural values like individualism or collectivism are emphasized, influencing citizens' perceptions of national identity and social roles. What role does globalization play in discourse analysis? Globalization has led to the emergence of transnational discourses that circulate across cultures, blending local and global meanings. Discourse analysts examine how global media, social movements, and cultural narratives interact with local discourses, producing new forms of meaning. For example, global advertising often spreads Western ideals of beauty and success, influencing cultural values in non-Western societies. How is intertextuality relevant to social phenomena in discourse? Intertextuality refers to how discourse draws on or references other texts and discourses. It is relevant to social phenomena because it shows how language practices are linked to broader cultural, historical, and ideological contexts. For instance, a political speech may reference historical events like the civil rights movement, connecting current policies to a larger narrative of social justice. How does media discourse shape social phenomena? Media discourse plays a significant role in shaping social phenomena by framing issues, constructing identities, and influencing public perception. For example, media representations of immigration often use terms like illegal immigrant or migrant crisis, framing the issue in ways that reflect and reinforce power dynamics and ideological struggles. Discourse analysis of media coverage can reveal these framing practices and their societal impact. How does discourse shape our understanding of concepts like success or beauty? Discourse shapes our understanding of concepts like success or beauty by embedding cultural and ideological values in language. For example, advertising discourse often links success to individual effort and material wealth, reflecting capitalist ideals. Similarly, beauty standards are constructed through media discourse, which promotes specific ideals of appearance. Discourse analysis examines how these concepts are framed and how they influence societal norms. What is the significance of language in constructing collective identities? Language is crucial in constructing collective identities by creating a sense of belonging and solidarity among group members. Shared language practices, such as using specific terms or slogans, help define group boundaries and distinguish insiders from outsiders. For example, environmental activists might use terms like sustainability warriors to create a collective identity centered around environmental protection. Discourse analysis explores how these identities are constructed and maintained through language.